So there are reports of a gold ore deposit discovered in China. Now, I got mixed up there. It could potentially be the world's largest, according to Chinese state media. Geologists are said to have found nearly 40 gold veins connected to possibly 330 tons of gold under an existing mine. Let's take a closer look at this discovery. We're joined by Richard Goldfarb, research professor at the Colorado School of Mines. Thank you very much indeed for giving us the time. You have such a distinguished career. You've examined quite a few gold deposits in your time. Could you tell us, what did you think when you read about this Chinese discovery?
Well, Andrew, I've spent a lot of years in China. I've worked there quite a bit over the last 30 years. And, like anything, once one press release is picked up, the media runs with it. And so we've seen hundreds of these announcements, how it's a huge new find. It's the biggest gold deposit in the world, potentially. But it's highly exaggerated. It's an area where there's an active gold mine. They did some drilling. They probably hit some more veins with gold in them, but it's nothing exceptional. The amount of gold that they talk about that could be there, that is probably highly exaggerated, is no more amount of gold than you have in the biggest gold mines there in Ontario. Detour Lake is 1,000 tons of gold. Wow. That they're mining there in Ontario. The world's biggest gold mine of this type is in Uzbekistan with 5,000 tons. So first off, it wouldn't be the world's largest gold deposit. And second off, it is a huge exaggeration. There probably haven't been enough drill holes, as in many places in China, to know exactly how much gold is there. With many provincial bureaus in China, they're overly optimistic. There's going to be gold there, but it's certainly not a world-class gold find based on what has been done so far.
And there's wheels within wheels. The rules and regulations in China on disclosure are not as tight as North America. And you think local politicians might be talking this up to get funding from Beijing?
Not local politicians, the local Geologic Bureau. And unlike the 43101 requirements that you have in Canada or JRC requirements in Australia, the requirements are a lot looser in China. For many years, I've gone back to China. They reported giant discoveries. You go out and look at these, and, they found some gold, and they're very optimistic. But the requirements of what are there are very lenient in China. So more often than not, it's a smaller discovery, and they also mine these smaller scale than they do in the West. The big mines in Canada are open pits that might mine 20 or 25 tons of gold a year. There's one mine in China that mines 7 tons of gold. Most of the big mines in China only mine a ton of gold. So even when there are new discoveries, the production is much slower and more limited, more small scale than it is in the West.
It is interesting, though. China is apparently the world's biggest producer of gold.
China does produce about 10 to 12% of the world's gold. They produce somewhere between 350 and 400 tons of gold per year. Now, some people in the West question that because the resource and reserve numbers from China certainly are not realistic, but the production numbers are realistic. Beijing needs to know these for tax purposes. And there are so many small mines all over China. China has very favorable geology for a lot of gold provinces. And there's a lot of half-ton, 1 ton per mine, 1 ton per year mines that do produce. So the fact that they produce 10 to 12% of the world's gold each year is not surprising, and certainly I think is very believable.
We've heard in the past that mining or production of rare earths was conducted by organized crime in some regions. Does that apply to gold in China?
I would say no. Most of the gold is produced by, Chinese mining companies, China Gold, Shandong Gold, and they're pretty well connected with the government. I'm not an expert on the politics of
Hmm.
it, but certainly they're not as independent as, say, some of the big Western gold mining companies like Newmont and Barrick. I mean, there is a connection to the government, and a lot of these have actually been turned over to the Chinese mining companies from sort of Chinese government entities like what used to be called the Chinese Gold Army, which was a branch of military which did a lot of the supposed exploration in China, which more so recovered a lot of historic operations from local people and sort of transferred those to the Chinese mining companies. There are no Western companies left gold mining in China. The last one company from British Columbia pulled out about 5, 6 years ago. So all the mining is by Chinese companies now.
Before we let you go, Richard, we've less than a minute. I'm sorry about that. Gold near record highs, not in inflation-adjusted terms. I know it's been higher in the past when you take inflation into account. But what do you think? What has pushed gold higher as an expert on mining?
Oh boy, that's an economic question. You know, I really don't know, but certainly the demand for gold does exceed production. Production globally is about 3,100 tons per year. Global demand is about 4,300 tons per year, especially with the new wealth in countries like China and India, where they often don't want currency but do want gold. So I think part of it is the global demand is higher for gold. And unless we discover more, demand is still going to keep outpacing production, and maybe that'll keep the price rising.